Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to Cambridge City Council's Housing Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Pounds and I'm chair of this committee meeting taking place at 5:30 on the 19th of September 2023. I will roll call the councillors alphabetically by surname to ensure they are present. We have received apologies from Councillor Tong and Councillor Titala-Varki. Councillors Bennett and Swift are attending as alternatives. Thank you very much. Are you present, Councillor? Bennett?
Thank you, Chair.
Griffin?
Thank you, Chair.
Holloway?
Yep, present.
Lee?
Present.
Martinelli?
Yes, Chair.
I'm present. Councillor Robertson?
Present.
Swift? Wade?
Present.
And finally, the Executive Councillor for Housing and Homelessness, Councillor Bird. Present. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm now going to roll call the tenant and leaseholder representatives alphabetically by surname. Christabella Amitai is attending the meeting virtually.
Present.
Hello. And that means you can participate, but you're not able to vote. Diane Best is also, I believe, attending by Teams. Yes, hello, Diana.
Hello. Present.
Officers and public speakers will join us throughout the course of the meeting. Oh, you're not on the list. Anyway, welcome, Councillor Mandy Powell-Hardy and Diana Minns.
Present.
Thank you. I beg your pardon. Sorry, yes. Officers and public speakers are here and welcome this evening to join us throughout the course of the meeting. I'll introduce you at the start of relevant items. Just some housekeeping. There are spare copies of the agenda if no one has one available on the seats to the right of the dais. Copies are also available on the council's website. Please could I advise members of the public that the only public entrance exit from the Guildhall for committee meetings is the Pease Hall entrance, which I assume that's the one you came in from. This can be accessed from the rear of the council chamber, turn right and either use the lift or the stairs to return to the ground floor, where you can then exit the building. Please can those in the council chamber note that everything on your desk, including your laptop screen, is likely to be broadcast at some point. The camera follows the microphone being switched on, so councillors and officers are requested to wait a couple of seconds before speaking once you've switched your microphone on to allow the camera to catch up. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak. Please can those participating in the meeting via Teams indicate that you wish to speak via the chat column or raised hand option. Now, I've moved my screen down so that I can see the whole chamber, so I'm hoping if somebody raises their hands, because I won't necessarily see. Okay. Please don't use the chat column for any other purpose. It's neither confidential nor private and can be subject to a freedom of information or data protection request. The committee will receive an oral presentation from officers. Members of the committee will then discuss the report and vote on the recommendations. Tenant and leaseholder representatives will participate in the debates on all agenda items, but you may only vote on items in part 1 of the agenda. Part 1 of the meeting will be chaired by Diana, and then I will chair part 2 of the agenda. Following the vote of the committee, the executive councillor, as the decision maker, will be asked if they agree the decision. Moving on to agenda item 2 now, could committee members please advise if they have any declarations of interests and identify which agenda item their declaration relates to. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Holloway?
I have a declaration for item 10. I am friends with some people who were leaseholders at Fanshawe Road.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? No, I think that's all. Item 3 are the minutes of the 20th of June. They've been submitted to this meeting for approval. Are there any comments, please, on the minutes of our last meeting? Can they be approved? No? I think everybody's happy with the minutes. Thank you very much. Minutes are approved. Yep. So now we're going to move on to agenda item 4. This is a petition from the Protect the Residents of Ekin Road estate. So we've received a petition containing over 50 valid signatures. So the petition organisers will be given 5 minutes between them to present the petition, and then the petition will be discussed by councillors for a maximum of 15 minutes. So I'd like to invite now the petitioners to present. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel. This petition is presented by the Save Ekin Road resident group, having received 35 digital and 31 paper signatures. We didn't have access to the JLL report before writing the petition. Our petition reduces to one key idea. We understand that the council has responsibilities regarding the provision of housing, but it also has a responsibility to do this fairly. This has two parts: fair process and fair outcome. There isn't just one way to carry out the project. What we're asking is that you meaningfully consult with residents and keep an open mind to the available options.
Hello, I'm Maurice. I'll speak on process. This covers points 1 and 2 of our petition. The current optioneering process has been rushed, is premature in removing 5 options, is lacking in scrutiny and feels tick-boxy. It seems you've predetermined a preferred option of full demolition and are working backwards to justify it. This is deeply unfair. Shortlisting had near zero resident consultation in the 6 months between releasing the long and short lists. You held 1 liaison group meeting and 2 poorly attended drop-in sessions. We've been requesting resident input into the JLL study since April. This was consistently denied. Residents don't even have a copy of the instructions sent to JLL regarding shortlisting. There has been no proper assessment of impact on residents, which should be central to the decision-making. Instead, great weight is given to the high-level JLL study of only the economic case. The equalities impact assessment is wholly inadequate. It makes only generalised assertions and is not grounded in any understanding of the residents, many of whom have protected characteristics. We've been advised it's currently legally defective. And it was produced after shortlisting, making clear it was a tick-box afterthought rather than something guiding and informing the optioneering. Your process is contrary to government guidelines on conducting consultations. The Estate Regeneration Good Practice Guide has not been followed. The decisions are terribly rushed. The JLL report was released only 15 days ago, leaving no time for residents to digest it and respond. And so resident feedback forms no part of the optioneering process, reinforcing the feeling that you're ignoring us and conducting tick-box engagement. Residents weren't even provided with the JLL report prior to the meeting held to discuss it, and were simply presented it at that meeting as a fait accompli. The JLL shortlisting has ignored resident wellbeing in the evaluation matrix. All 11 points should have been considered simultaneously, otherwise it leads to a shortlist distorted towards fiscal and administrative objectives. The council's recommendation relies heavily on the 77% of residents voted for redevelopment survey result. Now, that's one data point from one survey carried out 1 year ago, completed by less than 1/4 of residents, based on one word, redevelopment, that we told you in an HSC meeting last year was widely misinterpreted as fix up. You now plan to consult residents on what are essentially 2 variants of full demolition. Either way, 84% of dwellings go, so what are you even asking those residents? This is all predetermined. The overall consequence of this unfair process is that far too many options have been removed prematurely without proper scrutiny or meaningful consultation and with no understanding of the impact on residents and their protected characteristics under equalities legislation.
Hi, I'm Miriam. I'll speak on the outcomes. This covers point 3 of our petition and our addendum. You've given no details as to how residents will be rehoused locally. Many residents grew up in the local area and have close ties to it. Any large-scale demolition will scatter residents farther afield, inducing stress and anxiety. These are not just houses, bungalows, and flats. These are homes within a community, one that your proposals completely blows away. Scale-down demolition would at least preserve a critical mass. Refurbishment would save it entirely. We have many residents who have been in their houses for over half a century. Several will be displaced under both options. It's not easy moving home when you're 82. We have families with school-age children, many of whom will lose their homes under both options. These children may need to be pulled out of the school, which can have long-term consequences to their mental health. We have many residents with significant medical conditions that have to change GP surgery, a disruption that could have a burst impact on their health. You promised us better housing, yet some council tenants from the Foreshore Road project were moved to Ekin Road flats, which could hardly consider an upgrade. There is vast collateral damage, as you propose to demolish up to 32 perfectly good 3-bed houses without adequate replacement. Cambridge has a chronic shortage of this type of housing, one that many current flat residents are waiting for. Freeholders stand to lose immensely in this process. These are some of the most affordable houses in Cambridge, so they'll be forced to move out of the city or take an impossible larger mortgage. Right of returns means nothing to them. Your proposed options are the least environmentally friendly, with the highest per dwelling lifetime CO2 output. If option 4 is still viable to some extent, why is being disregarded? It provides a significant increase in dwellings, addresses issues with the flats, and alters the layout of the street, all the things you want to achieve. Perhaps why not consider a hybrid option, retain and refurbish half of the flats, those which will otherwise be replaced with lower density housing, and rebuild the other half. This is the sort of creative thinking that would come from a fair engagement process that might lead to a fair outcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just in time. Well done, thank you. Right, we now have 15 minutes of discussion amongst councillors to consider your petition and comment on your petition. Any councillors who would like to comment? Councillor Wade?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Was the JLL report available prior to the meeting of Monday, 4th of September, please? When was the report released to the public domain and in what formats? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bird, would you like to respond and possibly...
I think I'll pass this to Ben Binns, the officer, because he'll have the exact date.
Thank you, Ben, if you would like to respond. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, so this is the JLL report. When was that made live? That was on September the 4th at 5:30.
Councillor Bennett and then Councillor Griffin.
I intended to read Elliot Tong's statement, but I just want to comment on the previous point made. The report was released on September the 4th at 5:30. Councillors were told of the main conclusions at 4:30 at a venue that does not have Wi-Fi. That residents came in at 5:30. There were no paper copies of residents. Many of the residents are digitally excluded. Because the meeting was so stormy and I stayed to listen to residents' complaints afterwards, I personally didn't even see the report until 9:30 that evening. And some of the residents still haven't seen it.
Thank you. Councillor Holloway? Oh, I beg your pardon. Oh, no, sorry, there was a Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chair. First, I would like to thank the residents for their hard work here. I think there's been a lot of hard work organizing and talking to one another, and that's really good to see. I think also, compared to, let's say, some past interventions, this is a much more constructive approach to sort of recognizing that the city does have a responsibility to maintain the housing stock, and that if it weren't considering, if it weren't looking at locations like Eakin Road and considering, how can they be improved, how can they be developed, I think they would be negligent, right? And so they are doing their job, essentially. And I think the constructive part of your engagement here is to say the job could be, you could improve the way you're doing that job. And I hear that loud and clear, and I think there have been, at least it seems to me, some problems with communication in the past. That certainly seems to be the case. However, as far as the JLL study goes, I'm just, what I don't know is what criteria are allowed in considering this kind of, I guess I'm directing this at Ben Binns. When writing such a report, what criteria can be considered, and are those criteria sort of independent? Are these criteria that are standard criteria that are applied across the board in many development projects? Or is this sort of an ad hoc list of criteria? Thanks.
Are you happy to respond?
Happy to answer. There are 11 critical success factors in the report, which details how they're measuring each option and how they will measure as they go forward. Some of those are standard in terms of looking at appraisal, Treasury book standards. Some of those are standards that relate to the council's corporate policies, including Sustainable Housing Design Guide, our policies on housing, housing strategy, and planning policy. So what it's trying to do is give a broad overview of all the options so that it can make a statement and objective view to say, look, if you want to fulfill these objectives, this is what it looks like from an independent review by an independent consultant. And that's exactly why we asked them to do that. It's not from the development team, it's not from anyone in the council, it's an independent, objective assessment. And I would recommend that people look at the report in detail. There's a lot of detail about carbon, there's a lot of detail about accessibility, a lot of detail about a whole range of corporate policies on there. So that's how that's been done. I would also add the same thing was done on Hanover and Princess, which we also undertook a very similar approach in terms of recommendations and shortlisting.
Thank you very much. And yes, and then Councillor Robertson.
So
and
thank
then
you for a
Councillor
follow-up. I'm just
Martinelli.
wondering, so the petition, talked about the impact on the mental health and anxiety and so on of the current residents. And to what extent I understand that, these kind of developments are often disruptive for residents. And so to what extent are those taken into consideration in this kind of development?
So what they'll have to take into account, disruption to all residents, tenants, leaseholders and freeholders in terms of if they have to move. So if you have a retrofit option, there may be temporary need for moving out. If you have any redevelopment option, then tenants, leaseholders and freeholders may have to move out, depending on what options they're looking at. So there's obviously an impact there. There's also an impact on the site as the development continues as it is. So that might be crime or antisocial behaviour, that might be damp, mould and condensation, which also have an impact on residents' well-being in the estate right now. So those are the two things that they'll be balancing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. I note in the petition that there's concern about the health and well-being of the residents. And I was wondering if the council can tell us how many of the flats have had problems with mould and condensation. My understanding is they're not insulated in any way, in a substantial way anyway, and that there are problems that people's health is at risk.
I'm happy to answer that. So in terms of the numbers, we have 17 reports of condensation-related mould, and they are broken down into 12 flats, 3 houses and 2 bungalows, and that's since December the 9th. What I would add is that there is more anecdotal evidence, but we're not counting that because we're only counting, as you'll see in a report that will come later, there is a procedure to be followed that's nationally prescribed on how you report such matters. So the figure I'm committing to is 17 in that respect.
Thank you. So we've clearly got a problem with the buildings on that estate, and it does underline the need to actually take some action.
Thank you. Councillor Martinelli, you're next.
Thank you, and thank you to the petitioners. I think obviously it's a great shame that it seems to have come to this, and I'm sympathetic to the council's overall goals in terms of housing and the environmental spec of the housing stock. But I just think it's very clear we need to do a better job of taking people with us on that. And I think sometimes there is a danger that the executive forgets that these are people's homes that we're talking about. And I just think we need to be more consultative and more sensitive to that in our approach going forwards. We seem to have a lot of these petitions at Housing Scrutiny Committee at the moment, and that does, I think, speak to perhaps there being a wider problem with that.
Thank you. I'd just like to raise a point here because Obviously, the consultation process is really key, isn't it, that we get it right? And I wondered if you could just outline, please, Ben, what you propose to do for the next phase, which I think runs from September to November, if I'm correct, yes, in terms of consulting with residents and making sure that it is an inclusive consultation.
Yes. I mean, I think if I may just state a comment on what has happened so far, in terms of engagement, 72% of households on the estate have engaged in the council in a meaningful way, whether that's through home visits or through email or telephone conversations. So that's quite a high proportion of engagement. In terms of the consultation process that's been carried forward, at least 15 letters have been sent to estate residents in the past 6 months to 12 months. There's been over 60 tenancy audits undertaken, mainly in the flats, but also in some of the houses and bungalows, and that's been undertaken by the council's housing officer. There's been 2 drop-in events at local community centres to ensure there's multiple channels. People don't always communicate via email, so we're talking about face-to-face as well. And there's been 4 liaison group meetings, of which the entire estate is invited to, should they wish to attend as well. In terms of going forward, we have stated a number of dates where we are inviting residents across the estate to meet us on a one-to-one basis so that we can address any concerns they may have about any aspect of the report. And there have been some concerns raised of what would happen if there was a future redevelopment in terms of their housing need. And we're well experienced in being able to provide considerate advice and reassuring people on that. Some people have mentioned about schools and other factors, and they have lived in their homes for 40 years. We're well aware of that. We've got a very good record of listening and responding sensitively to their needs in that. But as I say, we've invited that. We put dates in for residents to come forward and meet us on a one-to-one basis. We've committed to the further dates of the resident liaison group. We've committed to another survey that will be completed by the end of November, and that will be undertaken in a way that we will attempt to knock on every single door and reach every single resident to ensure we get meaningful engagement back on that. So that is a commitment. At the same time, we are listening to some of the feedback which has come back to us about having an independent channel so that if there are queries, that can be channeled through independent of the council. So we are looking at how we deal with that so that there is some independence in that. All of this will be put in an easy-to-read summary which will go live on the website by towards the end of September, and we've committed to that as well. And that is something that we'll go forward with. And of course, if there are further developments in the shortlisting and beyond, there will be further consultation related around that as well. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. Now, Christabella online has asked to speak a question.
Yes, I think Ben.
Hello, yes.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I think Ben has addressed some of my questions, but I think when the resident was speaking, she mentioned something about information was not given to the tenants about how they'll be rehoused. Not sure if I heard that right.
Are you happy to answer that as well? Thank you.
Yeah, happy to answer that. So every time there is any form of engagement in terms of a letter or a meeting or any other type of engagement, we do try and signpost people towards the various policies the council have, which if they're interested or want to know about rehousing and what their options are, that is in the public domain, and we make sure that they have the opportunity, either as a one-to-one a meeting with one of our officers, or we signpost them in terms of the website there. That information is regularly provided and will continue to be provided. And if we have to make it simpler and signpost it more regularly, signpost it in a way that it's easier to access, then we'll look at that.
Thank you very much. Did you want to follow up, Christabella?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
You're happy. Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Bennett, and I think it's probably we're just about there now. Yeah, in time.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to read Elliot Tong's statement since he can't be with us today. Over the last few years, all three of Abbey Ward's city councils have been in and out of Eakin Road flats and to a certain extent the houses and bungalows. We've seen for ourselves the dreadful condition of Eakin Road's flats. They are plagued with dangerous levels of condensation, damp, mould, rats, subsident, poorly fitting doors and windows, and even when you turn the heating up to maximum, which few of our residents can afford to do, the flats are still cold, we don't believe that anybody would say they should be left in their current state. Okay, rest of it I'm happy to circulate, but I don't want to go over meeting time because we've got a very long agenda.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bennett, yes. And thank you for highlighting the need, I think, for something to be done. Councillor Bird. Are you happy to respond?
Thank you, Chair. With any repairs, we worry, and we do know that there's lots of problems on that estate. That was found at the beginning of when we had our first consultation with the residents out on the green, because I can remember that. And that is one of the main things we need to do. We need to sort out to get these flats at a decent standard. If not, rebuild. We have not decided anything yet. We're just going through all the motions of the consultations, trying to keep the residents completely up to date. We're not hiding anything from you. We are compassionate. We all understand when you've lived somewhere for all them years, it is hard, but we take every single resident's issues to heart. So if you come to us and say you need an accessible property, that's what we'd look for. So that's every single resident, whatever you need, we'd look for it for you. We also give you the opportunity to move back if we redevelop. So every resident would have the opportunity to move back. This is something we've always said, and I think Ben will quote me on that as well. So I want you to know that whatever happens, we're here. We have homes, so we understand, you know, but there's so many problems with these flats and the bungalows. When we've spoken to the people that live there, they have told us the damp, the mould, the rats and everything. There are the 60s, the properties. They really need redevelopment. We've done it around the city already. And I'd love to be able to take you to see some of the developments that have been done and the great work. We actually have a tenant rep who's here, who actually moved from Hanover and Princess Court, and she was moved to Mill Road, the new housing complex there, Ironworks, and she didn't want to go back. She's happy where she is. And there was quite a few residents that did that. So, you know, there's so many options available, but we have not made our decision yet. The decision will be made once you've had every bit of information you need, okay? So I hope that will help ease some of it. Please do not worry. If you are worried, I'm quite happy to come to your house and speak to you. You know, if you're worried about anything, please let me know. That's what we're here for. But we definitely aren't looking at anything yet until everything has been said to you. I promise you. Okay?
Thank you very
Chair.
much, Councillor Bird. Thank you very much. I hope you feel reassured that things will progress and that you have channels through which you can continue to express yourselves. Right, I'd like to move on now, please, to public questions. So, right, so this session lasts for 30 minutes. We have 6 registered public speakers, and my colleague here will know the order, I think. So can I please ask you to be as succinct as you possibly can and as brief as you possibly can. Obviously, you want to get your message over, but within that time frame, it would be great if everybody could be heard. If we run out of time, then the procedure is that your question is submitted and you will get a written response from the Executive Councillor. But if we're all mindful of the time, I think everybody should be able to be heard. So you have 3 minutes to make your statement or you ask your question. You will get a response if it's appropriate. And then if you wish to ask a follow-up question, which must be to do with the response you've been given, it's not to ask a different question, you then have 2 minutes to ask your follow-up question, a maximum of 2 minutes. You will hear the bell 30 seconds before your time is up each time to give you a warning so that you can sum up what you're saying. Okay, so if we have public question number 1, please. It's a statement, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry,
Yes.
Chair. So I've got 2 statements to read, first of all, from 2 separate people. So if I read those first and then...
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. The various options put forward regarding the redevelopment of the Eakin Road estate are obviously causing a lot of anxiety and concern, especially given the amount of time it's taking to choose a direction. Other residents and I who live in the flats would of course prefer if there were an option or opportunity that could still be reached to redevelop the flats and allow people to keep their homes if they want to stay. Ultimately, the council and committee must do what's best for the wider community and observe the will of the majority of residents on the estate, as per the council's own survey conducted, which shows most support at least partial redevelopment. State of the flats is only getting worse, with some residents living in difficult conditions and having to face at least one more winter without being able to afford adequate heating in a lot of cases. As a resident of the flats who's spoken to other residents recently, I urge the council and the committee to prioritise the well-being of the majority of the residents and move forward with the best option to make improvements happen, including partial or full redevelopment with urgency. Thank you. This is the second statement. I'd like to state my support for option 7, full redevelopment. I do not believe any of the other options, including option 6, retaining the houses to the south and east, are viable, as some of those houses are also in poor condition and will inevitably also need replacing in the near future. Furthermore, this option will mean the residents in the remaining houses will be condemned to living in a major building site for years. Eakin Road has a declining reputation and increased antisocial behaviour and needs total redevelopment to bring a fresh start to the community. I'll end by saying that the loudest voices do not necessarily represent the majority, and the council needs to ensure that everyone's given the right to express their opinion privately.
Thank you. Now we have public speaker number 3. It's Teresa Newson.
Hi, I'm Teresa. I moved into Eakin Road with my young family on the 12th of the 1st, 91. Makes it 33 years. Many others around the estate have been longer. I work within the homeless sector. My husband works in Bury St Edmunds as he's the only driver. Our daughter and my son-in-law live with us. My daughter works for the NHS. My son-in-law works from home. My question is, why do you want to knock down perfectly good 3-bedroom houses in Eakin Road when there is a lack of them for families that have nothing or very little wrong with them? If I'm forced out of my home, would we get a 3-bed house or a flat in Cambridge? If it's out of Cambridge, that would impact my job as I don't drive and the public transport is unreliable. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Would you like to respond then? Yeah.
Yes, so can I just clarify, you're a tenant, did you say? You a tenant? Yes, okay. So depending on your circumstances, I don't know everything about your background, but obviously we would sit down with you, should there be redevelopment, and understand what your needs are. You've just explained some of those needs. Other people have needs about schools or accessibility, whatever they may be. And so if your needs require a 3-bedroom flat, our officers would do their best to find you a 3-bedroom flat or a house or whatever you're in at the moment. And if your need is to stay in that immediate area, then that's what we'll look to do. Sometimes it takes a bit longer if you've got very specific needs. Sometimes it's something that can happen quite quickly. So I can't give you any assurance of how long it would take should there be redevelopment, but I can give you assurance that we would sit down and understand what your priorities are and what your needs are. If that's what you want to do in terms of staying in the area, we would listen to that and try and act on that. In terms of why the houses included in the option 7, which is the shortlist option, is that there's a whole list of reasons of looking at full redevelopment. In effect, we've gone for retrofit and full redevelopment with one option in the middle. And the reason to do that is to provide the council a full overview of what the two extremes, if you like, are in terms of how that might impact on the community. We've got to take into account how much it would cost to purchase the homes there if that was a full redevelopment option versus what money there is left in what money is available in the HRA. There's a whole host of reasons, as well as health and well-being and what benefits can be brought to the community. But the council does need to know that full option. It doesn't necessarily make that decision to go for full redevelopment, but at least it's got a comparison of what if we do retrofit and what do we do with full redevelopment with an option in the middle. That seems to me a sensible way to approach a decision going forward.
Thank you very much. Did you have a follow-up question, Teresa? No? Thank you. The next questioner is Meg.
Hello, I'm Meg, and I live on Ekin Road in a council flat. I've been living here for nearly 12 years. I'm very grateful to the council for providing me with housing. When I was given my flat, it was quite run down with poor quality maintenance work, as was probably the case with many other flats on the street at that time. It took me a lot of effort, a lot of savings, a lot of finances to turn into a homely place that I'm now very proud of. For 6 years, I spent every penny to redecorate it. My daughter and I would avoid going on holidays just to make sure I had enough money to make our flat a nice place to live. Now you want to take my flat and demolish it. This is heartbreaking for me. You are forcing me to start again from scratch. It took me so long to get my flat up to my standards of comfortable, happy living for us. Everyone has their own priorities in life, and one of mine is to have a beautiful place to call it home. I'm 60 now. As much as I would like to come back to a new Ekin Road, at my age, I'm not sure if I have the stamina to move out and then move back after 3, 4, 5 years. I want to know what type of standard my new flat might be. I don't want to be given another rundown flat and spend years of time and money on it. I heard that people from Fenshaw Road were moved out to Ekin Road. This scares me. Will you move me out into another flat that is almost identical to what I have now, except that it won't have been decorated like mine is? What's the point of that? You want to disrupt my life and my home with no benefit for me? Please don't tell us about the fantastic future of people on Ekin Road, because this future does not belong to us. Why do I have to sacrifice myself for others who will be living on Ekin Road? I understand that I might benefit if I'm given a brand new flat, But as much as I would like to live in a new build, I don't know if I can even afford it with the rising costs of living. An extra £250 a month would be a huge burden, not only for me, but for a lot of other families on the street as well. But that would still come with a higher rent. I can't choose to turn off I can choose to turn off my heating to save money, but I can't choose to turn off my rent and council tax. This whole situation has been an enormous source of anxiety and stress for me. What accommodation are you guaranteeing for those of us who will be forced to leave Egan Road? If you can't give an absolute guarantee that we will be given affordable new built flats, then please leave us where we are and carry out individual improvements on flats that are needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bird, would you like to respond?
Thank you for that. Yes, we understand that you spent a lot of money on that and it's your home. But if we redevelop, then you'll get a nice new place. It could be anywhere, or you could move back. We've got developments going on maybe at East Barnwell, so it's not far away. So there's a lot going on, but we would try and help you the best we can. And I don't know if you realise that you do get help with the cost of the removers and also for the disturbance of moving you out of your property. So I don't know if you've all been told that. Right, okay, that's good. So as long as you've got that information. But you must understand that a lot of the flats there are in a bad condition. And we do need to do something. So if we don't redevelop, we'd have to do a retrofit, which Ben could explain a bit more about it. Do you mind doing that, Ben?
Certainly. This is talking about the retrofit option. Yeah. So if the council wanted to approve the retrofit option going forward as one of the options described here, that may mean some temporary moving out. It depends on the scale of the retrofit that happens with that, but that would bring your flat up to a certain standard in doing that. And what we have to weigh up as the council is the cost of doing that, plus the cost of having to relocate people, rehouse people, and the inconvenience that brings against the options of redevelopment. And that's what we're trying to balance. What is the best way forward? All of these are incredibly disruptive for residents. We understand that. These aren't easy decisions to make. And, we're not making decisions or putting forward options to just proceed blindly. We're trying to do this with care. We're trying to do this with humanity as we go forward on that. I hope some reassurance has been provided on what the options are for you in terms of that. There's a point of clarity I'd just like to add about Fanshawe, is we're not aware of any residents that have moved from Fanshawe to Eakin. That's not been recorded anywhere on any of our documentation whatsoever. So I'm not sure where that came about, but I'd just like to clarify that.
Ben, do you have a follow-up question, Meg? Do you have a follow-up question, Meg? No. Thank you very much. Our next questioner is Liza. You have a question for the committee. Lisa, I beg your pardon.
Hi, I'm Lisa and I live in a council house on Eakin Road with my mum and little brother. My mum grew up locally to the area and we have all our family connections right here. I even have a cousin who lives on Eakin Road and an uncle that's very nearby. We have been in our home for 38 years. My brother had his first birthday here. To us, this is much more than just a house. Sorry. It's our entire world. We had a fantastic childhood around here with so many great memories. We all look out for each other on Eakin Road and watch each other's children, and as a first aider, I can't tell you how many times I've stuck my neighbours back together. There are so many connections here for us, family, friends, a familiar area, close to work, and my church. With a great community of neighbours, this is our home, and we don't want to lose it. My mother's sanctuary is her garden. We have hedgehogs and we have rare newts in the pond. My nana's tree in the garden. My mum has spent 38 years making it her special place, and it has been her comfort throughout all the years, and it's helped keep her sane to deal with all of life's stresses. She gets great meaning and purpose in life from her children, her grandchildren, and her garden. If you take that away, then all will start to fall apart. I've had difficulty, especially in the last few years. I have both been physically and mentally attacked, and I have traumas. I do suffer with PTSD and a spinal condition and nerve damage. Thank you, sweetheart. That cannot be fixed. To have to move would make it all so much worse, especially if I had to change doctors. It freaks me out, even just thinking about having to repeat my history to a new doctor. I don't think I could do it. My traumas do make it very hard to deal with day-to-day life, but knowing when I wake up in the morning I can go out, put a brave face on, I know when I come home I'm in my safe space. I've lost my face, sorry. But you want to take it all away from us. You talk about building a new community, and you're going to destroy our community, and that of my friends and family in the process. I think the council, this could mentally destroy me and possibly push me right over the edge. And it would possibly destroy my mum too. The fact that someone else is making these decisions and forcing it on us makes it so much worse. We feel totally helpless with no say at all in our own destiny. I'm only one story of many in the street, and it feels like you're not looking at us as people, but just as land and home. That's how it does feel. We understand that work does need to be done on our street, but it doesn't make sense to tear down a whole community in the process. You're hurting so many people, and it feels like you're working against us and not with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bird, would you like to respond, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm really sorry. Don't want to upset you like that. I think, yes, on some residents, because everything hasn't been, you've sort of been so worried about it, the way things have gone. And I want to assure you that we are not wanting to disrupt your community, but we have to look at the age of the properties. Now, if we can get the properties done nice, Mum can probably move back. That's if we redevelop. Like I've said all the night, we don't know how and what we're going to do yet. But please don't get upset. And you know, I'm quite happy to come and talk to you as well about what's happening. Yeah? I can understand how you feel. But I think everything's built up over the few months that we've been looking into this. That's why we're taking it very slow and want to meet every single resident. So we and Ben will make sure that we make appointments with you. I'll come along with Ben and speak to you each individually so we can sort this out. We don't want you upset like that. Take it from me, all right? We hate to see that. But we have to look at other things as well. But I am thinking of you, all right? And I'll give you my card before you go so you can contact me, all right? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Thank you. I hope you feel reassured by that and that we all are very, very concerned that everybody's needs are met. So we will move on now to the last speaker, please, which is Lisa Hyder. Have I got that right? Sorry.
Be reading Lisa's statement as she can't be here. My name is Lisa. I am on Eakin Road in a 2-bedroom flat with my husband and 3 children aged 2, 8 and 11. We've been living in our flat for about 10 years and we've completely outgrown it. We need a 3-bedroom family home. We have strong links to the local area. My sister-in-law lives in a house opposite, and next door to her are our longtime family friends. My husband suffers from anxiety issues, and one of my children has learning difficulties. We need our local support network just to survive. We don't understand how this project benefits us. Another 2-bed flat doesn't help us, especially if it's in a different area away from our support network. This project might make a lot of flats, but it doesn't make any houses, so our situation does not improve. We saw that the council had several 3-bed homes on our street become available recently, yet chose to use them as temporary housing. That doesn't make any sense. You could have moved us into one of those, which would have solved all our problems and been ideal for us. Why focus on creating more and more flats when it's more 3-bed houses that everyone needs?
Thank you very much. Ben, would you like to respond? Because there's quite a few issues there, aren't there? Not just in terms of rehousing, but the general policy of housing, I think, that you may be able to help with. Thank you.
Certainly. Of course, it's very disruptive and unsettling. All of this, I understand. The first thing I think we can do is understand your individual circumstances, or the person's individual circumstances. If they are looking for a 3-bed house already, then we can take that away and look into that with the relevant housing officer, just to see where they've got to in that. In terms of moving forward, if there is an option to redevelop, then that will include some houses on that redevelopment option. I can't say how many, but clearly there is a need for 3-bed houses, 4-bed houses, as well as 1-bed and 2-bed flats in the city. That's in the public domain in terms of what we need to provide for council housing. If we find the information, if they're already looking for a 3-bed house and there's nothing we can do on that, they have to wait for a potential redevelopment. If that is approved, then again, I stress, we would listen to individual needs. There's lots of individual needs in these stories that have come out today about needing to be close to a doctor, close to family, close to schools. All of those are highly relevant, very important that we get right. And so I would urge to come forward and meet one of our officers, and we'll sit down and listen and understand and try and reassure you that if redevelopment does go ahead, what the options are in that. And I'd just like to say that we've got a lot of experience in rehousing people in a choice lettings basis. So in other words, they choose the home of where they want to live. And we've had great success stories in that. And that's because we listen to the tenants and to leaseholders and to residents in general about their needs. And that is the most effective way to move forward in any option in order to do this. So I hope that's some reassurance, but I'd urge you to come forward and we can listen to you and understand what we can do now and what options you have should redevelopment go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yes, did you have a supplementary question? No, thank you. We have another officer online, Suzanne Hemingway. Did you want to comment at all, Suzanne?
Just wanted to add that we will take account of people's needs. So if you have a need for a bigger property we will not move you into something that is too small. You know, be very, very clear. If people are already living in properties that are too small, we will move you into something that meets your needs. And as Ben said, you'll get a choice, plenty of time to look at what properties are available so that you can hopefully choose something that's in an area that works for you. And that, you know, for you, that could be a good outcome to move to somewhere that's bigger. But we would not deliberately move somebody into a property that was too small for them.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Thank you for that. And thank you, everybody, for your questions and for the responses. Thank you, Ben. So we're now going to move on to the actual discussion on Eakin Road and the development, which is item 6. So I'm going to now ask Ben, as Assistant Director Development Officer, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to provide a summary of the report, which is in front of you and available publicly. So I think the first thing to say is that this follows on a September 21 HSC report that Eakin Road would be one of the estates would be looking at for potential regeneration. And in September 22, we indicate that work will be going forward in terms of consultation. We did undertake a survey in 2022 that had 63 responses from 58 households, and 77.5% strongly agreed or agreed in favour of redevelopment. We have mentioned previously in the questions earlier that we will be undertaking a further survey. On the 30th of May, Jones Lang LaSalle JLL were appointed to develop an options appraisal, which is part of the report. And their approach would be in 2 stages. Stage 1, to shortlist a long list. So we had 7 options that would be shortlisted, coming back to committee, which is this committee, and stage 2 of the shortlist to carry forward to do further work to come back to committee in June 24 with a recommendation. The report, in the initial report, highlighted 7 options ranging from do nothing to various redevelopment options to full redevelopment. And the initial report has concluded that 3 options should be carried forward, and it's those 3 options that we are asking for approval to move forward with further work to be undertaken by JLL alongside some further engagement with residents. And those options are option 2, which is to retain the buildings and undertake repairs and retrofitting. Now, the reason that is now the baseline option rather than option 1, to do nothing is no longer an option for the council. We would have to undertake some repairs, and with the damp and mould issue, we've got to do some quite significant repairs. So it was felt option 2 should be carried forward, even though the JLL report clearly states that this is not a particularly favoured option, but it produces a useful option as a baseline. And option 6, which is partial redevelopment, including the retention of houses to the south and the east, and then option 7, full redevelopment. The report also outlines consultation work that's taken place, and we've identified and put forward dates for individual appointments. Some of those are getting filled up, so if there's more dates we need to put in for people to have appointments, we will follow that up and provide more dates. We've got 3 more liaison groups before June 24. We've committed to the survey, and we are also going to publish the consultation route and roadmap by September the 27th as well. So the recommendations are, for clarity, is to note the completion of stage 1 of the options appraisal for Eakin Road, note the proposal for further consultation with the residents in the course of stage 2, and to approve the progress to stage 2 of the options appraisal on the basis of the criteria and the options set out in the stage 1 report. That is to carry forward with options 2, 6 and 7, and to approve a revenue budget of 300,000 to assist with that work to be carried forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Now we move on to members' questions. Do we have questions on this item? Any questions on the report? So Councillor Martinelli, then Councillor Bennett. Councillor Robertson, Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we've talked a lot about reassurance so far this evening, and I guess I just wanted some reassurance that option 2 is actually considered a plausible option for this, because I'm, having read the report, the implication that I got certainly was that we were looking at 6 or 7, and it seems like, if we, the least the council could do is approach this with honesty, and I don't think we should be, saying option 2 is included purely to, provide hope for people that might be the ultimate outcome if that's not something we're genuinely considering. So I guess I'd like some reassurance on that point.
Reassurance on point 2. Yeah, the retrofit option is not an easy option. I mean, let's be clear about that. And it will mean, very likely to mean, that some people will have to move out, even if temporarily, in order to do that. And if we are to provide better homes in terms of insulation and also a lower energy bill, that can be quite extensive as well. So I think we need to be clear what we mean by retrofit. And so that's the work that JLL will have to provide in order to say this is what we mean by retrofit and the standard we're going for on that. It is a viable option in terms of being carried forward. What we don't know is the cost. We don't know what the implications are for people on there. So that's why the work has to be there. It's at a bare minimum, that is the work we have to do if we want to continue with the state in its current form moving forward for the next 30 years. I hope that provides reassurance.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the JLL report is causing a lot of confusion and anxiety among my residents. Many flat residents do not believe that the retrofit and refurbishment option is possible at all. I wouldn't claim to be an expert on housing finance, but I understand that we would not meet the terms for Homes England refurbishment grants for this. I'm not aware of any other central government funding that is available. If we are to take a baseline option, the classic one is do nothing. If we are, but could we not at least consider option 3, which is to redevelop the flats only, since that is the most popular option among the residents? Make some general comments about the report process. It would be hypocritical to me to say that I oppose getting further consultation and expert advice unilaterally, because that's how I make my living in my day job. But I am concerned about the cost of the options appraisal, which is stated as £300,000. That's a lot of money on a housing revenue account where money is always tight. I'm sure sort of as soon as we saw that figure, all of us were thinking about better ways that money could be put to use on our own ward. And I do understand having a baseline option because I include one in my own technical reports. But if we're paying £300,000 for this, and I think we all know that sort of option 2 is just not viable, paying sort of that amount of money to investigate that, it just goes against the grain.
I think that's a question in itself, right? Thank you. Ben, are you happy to respond?
So the question on 300,000 in terms of the budget, that is a budget which may or may not be spent in its entirety. There are a lot of work that's got to be undertaken. Each option, if approved, to carry forward, will need experts to come in and look at design, to look at carbon, to look at sustainability. So if we want to do a proper due diligence of the estate, which is what we're recommending, unfortunately we do have to spend some of that money. If we want to do a full consultation and full engagement with residents, that I'm afraid also costs some money to do that. There isn't an easy way out with this. We've seen the upset that this is causing, and if we are serious about looking at the options in a considered and careful way, I'm afraid we do have to spend that amount of money in order to give it the right due diligence the councils ought to take in this type of development.
Thank you very much. Yes. Councillor Robertson and then Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you. I do think we must recognise that keeping a community together is an important aspect of our work, if at all possible. Now, in this particular instance, we've heard very much from some of the members of the community that they value the area they live in, some of them value their properties themselves. And if we can keep them together, that would be an ideal solution. Now, there is the possibility of phasing I think that it's a question really, is it correct that phasing of the development in Eakin Road is almost going to have to happen anyway, no matter what work we do, and no matter how long it takes, because of the complication of developing such a large project in the area. Now, there is an advantage we have in Cambridge is that we are one of the leading house building councils in the country. Relative to our size, we are probably the leading council in building housing. That's not to say that we're doing enough, but the others are doing even worse. But the result of that is now that there is another project just through the alleyway from Eakin Road to Newmarket Road. On the other side of Newmarket Road, there's a big project which is in development, in planning, called the East Barnwell project. Now that will, I'd quite like, another question is, what is the timetable for producing that? Those houses and flats there? Because my understanding is that that's well advanced over this project in Eakin Road. But therefore, there may be very good possibilities for the local community to move across the road to the East Barnwell project. It is probably only 100 yards away. That's a big 100 yards across the main road, agreed. But nevertheless, what is the timing? And is it likely to help?
Yes, to answer that question. So if East Barnwell is approved at the November committee, we would expect to submit planning soon after, but target date is the end of November for that. It is a big scheme, but if that was submitted for planning at the end of November, we would expect to start on site between 6 and 12 months of that date to start making progress. So the timings are possible that if the committee in June next year decided to go for some form of redevelopment, that people may be able to move into a new redevelopment at East Barnwell. I have to say we need to be careful with the timings, and but that would be one approach we would like to take in order to offer that. And it's worked very well with Fanshawe and Mill Road, and it's worked very well with other schemes where we've been able to offer new build options. But So the answer is we would work towards that should both committees approve redevelopment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Griffin, yeah? Or did you want to follow up?
That's great. That's great to hear. The other point I was going to make is, of course, that although retrofitting is a possibility, I suspect it's a remote possibility because of the structure of the main flats, blocks of flats at Ekin Road. But I think that the alternative of new build is usually far to be preferred, partly because of the high quality of the housing we produce and the energy efficiency in particular, the passive house, high quality energy efficient properties. So I think we must recognise that there are major problems with those blocks of flats at the moment, and that replacing them is probably an option we were going to have to take. Nevertheless, we'll look at the three options that we've suggested and see what we can do. But as I say, I'll come back to keeping the community together if at all possible. And we have the advantage of over many other councils in having a big programme of housing going on that gives us that alternative option. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Griffin, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Chair. So this question is directed at Ben Binns. So I'm a new councillor, as you know, and this is the first time I've seen a report like the JLL report. And some of the, so I'm having a hard time interpreting some of the things in the report. In particular, I'm looking at the carbon costs. And as the petitioner has pointed out, that we seem to be suggesting what seemed to be the least environmentally friendly option. And so I want to understand how, when thinking about the next 30 years, how to factor in these what's called developmental carbon here, how to think about that as someone concerned about our carbon footprint here in Cambridge. So it does seem like the development carbon, is a big factor here. And so, can you help me out there? Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, happy to help out. So really what we're looking at is embodied carbon, which is the carbon in the materials, versus operational carbon, which is the carbon we use for our energy. And so when our standard at the moment in terms of following the Sustainable Housing Design Guide is moving towards net zero. We're around about passive house principles, but at some point we have to be net zero. So your operational carbon is going down. When you redevelop, and it's any redevelopment, there will be an element of new embodied carbon. So you have a balance of, you may increase your embodied carbon, but you reduce your operational carbon. And what you look at is the whole life cycle. Are you better off overall? Now what the report does look at, it sets standards that it's picked, sort of national standards, REBA standards. We're actually better than that on the operational side. And what we'll do, if this is passed, we'll look at the report with JLL and understand where the impact on embodied carbon may be. And it may be that we will have to look at some measures to reduce some of the embodied carbon. But the critical factor is we're trying to measure it before we do anything so that the council can make an informed choice of the three options going forward.
Thank you. I think we've done with members' questions, so we're going to move to the recommendations now. And the recommendations, which are on page 25 of the agenda, the Executive Council has recommended to note the completion of stage 1 of the options appraisal for Ekin Road, to note the proposals for further consultation with residents in the course of stage 2, to approve the progress to stage 2 of the options appraisal on the basis of the criteria and the options set out in the stage 1 report, and to approve that a revenue budget of £300,000 be identified to support this further stage 2 options appraisal work. I'll take those all in one go. So can I have all of those in favour of the recommendations, please?
So that's 6 in favour, Chair. It's just councillors voting on this.
And those against?
That's 1 against, Chair.
And those abstaining.
That's 2 abstentions, Chair.
So the recommendations are carried. Can I ask Councillor Bird, as Executive Council, if you accept our recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, yes, I do. And I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight and listening to us. And you know that we're being truthful with you all through the line, and we will carry on. And like I say, contact me anytime. And thank you, Ben. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Ben, for your contributions this evening. And I hope you all feel that you can talk to us and that we do care, and that you are being listened to. We're going to take a 5-minute break now, so if we can reconvene, please, as soon as possible, but certainly just after 10 to 7, as we have a large agenda still to follow. That'd be great. Thank you. We're now live.
Rachel's just got to come.
Apologies. Welcome back to the reconvene committee. I'm going to chair this part of the committee, which is there's a couple of items in part one of the agenda, which as the tenant rep, I'm vice chair for this bit, so I'm going to chair this. Right. Okay. So the first thing we have is a compliance update, which is agenda item 7 on page 101 by the look of it. And I've got, I hope Renier Barnard is going to speak to it. Here he is. Thank you, Ren. Would you like to introduce it? Thank you.
Evening, everybody. This will be a two-part again, as always, with the damp and mold part, which will be presented by Victoria and Sean. So I'll be as succinct as possible. So the report is always the 6 key compliance areas that we focus on, and I'll quickly run you through the key updates on that. Since the last report, we only had one property out of compliance for gas safety, and that was a use and occupation property. It's been brought back on to 100% since this report was drafted. And then also we posted 4,961 safety inspections. That is actually now over 5,500 inspections to date, with a first-time access rate of still above 81%, which is quite good. We still maintain 100% compliance on our communal gas safety as well. On fire safety, we have a lot of work streams. Some of it's ongoing, that is repeated annually, and some bits that is not going as well due to some contractors' delays. For example, the Kingsway fire alarm matrix, the cause and effect in terms of how the software works there, but we are dealing with that. Legionella, we have 100% compliance on that. And then also electrical safety, we've added another 200 inspections since the last committee report. That is actually more than 200 to date, and that is an increase from 61 to 66% on that. And then also passenger lifts, only one lift out of service currently, which is the one at Kingsway, so Discipline Place was reinstated. The passenger lift also at Kingsway, we've looked at those that might be affected, and we've identified 2 residents since the last committee, and we are liaising with those in terms of their needs for evacuation if required, if the lift is not available. On asbestos management, we've made some good progress on those areas as well. 20% on communal area review inspections. Also, we have a fixed appointment for that position going forward. The secondment has ended and we've appointed somebody, and we've identified a couple of areas where we've done remedial work, which was Ashbury Close, Golding, Minerva, Mulwood, Walpole and Wycliffe. So, and that is also then accompanied by the compliance dashboard, just for your consideration. So I'll probably pause this bit or take any questions and hand over to Victoria or Sean to deliver the bit on the DCM if they are available.
Shall I suggest we have questions to Ren on his part of the report? Yes. I've got a question, because you've mentioned asbestos. There's a big kind of, I think it's rack. I was going to ask a question of, do we have any identified of this terribly crumbling concrete within our properties? Knowing that there were so many properties being built in the 50s, well, so 60s and 70s, and at one stage the council had a 500 homes a year target. I'm wondering if there's anything snuck in there, whether we would be aware, because in some places too, it can link up with disturbing asbestos as well, I know, that we've probably seen. So I'm just wondering if you've got any statement, or whether we don't really quite know.
So with the asset manager, Will Barfield, we've done a desktop review of all our assets, and we have not identified any, but also we've got a pathway to do some further investigations to ensure that we have not mistaken by the desktop study that we missed any information. But at the moment, there's no indication that there is, but we're still making further inquiries to ensure that that is exactly the case.
Yeah, I just don't know. There was so much activity. We don't know that it didn't happen, with people didn't realise the implications of using it at the time. So I think we've got to obviously make sure there isn't anything in our council properties. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And that's my thing. And I'd say congratulations myself on all the progress that you've made as well in lots of these areas. Are there other questions? Councillor Martinelli.
Thank you. It would be all right if I asked about DCM. damp cold, condensation mold. I just wanted to check, there seems like a relatively high amount of DCM in the summer months.
We're going to take that a little bit later when we're going to do the first ones that you spoke to, and then from 6 onward we'll have a report back on the damp condensation and mould. We'll have the introduction, so if it's only about that, then if you just save it till the next introduction, that part of the report. Councillor Bennett, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say thank you to Renio and his team for keeping us safe.
Thank you.
And so say all of us, yes. I think that's really important. Thank you, Ren. Are there any other questions? I can't see some people behind the screen, no? So can I ask that we then next have Victoria? She's going to introduce the there was another one, sorry. Oh, sorry, sorry, you're a long way off, Mandy. You had a question.
One question I need to ask is, it says in here about the asbestos management. Has there been a figure given to how many properties actually still retain any forms of asbestos? And when will it be removed?
So there's no policy on removal as such, but we do have a duty of care, obviously, to anybody that works within the property. And then also we don't proactively survey other than planned maintenance or response repair works. So for the total stock, we have about 5,000 surveys on record, and so there's no proactive removal, only when it's within scope. Where the duty extends slightly further than that is those that can be affected in communal spaces, and there's over 5,000 inspection points that we are working through at the moment to make sure that we do not obviously expose people unknowingly to that risk as well.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Mandy? Thank you. Okay, could I now then ask Victoria to introduce the condensation, mould, and damp, or whatever way around we put the initials, yeah?
Good evening, Chair. My name's Sean Clear. I'm the Group Manager, and I'll be feeding back this report for this evening, with Victoria supporting in the event of any further clarity to be raised on questions that are raised. Condensation, mould and damp work, otherwise referred to as DCM through the document. Since the previous report, we have seen a decrease in reported cases of damp, mould and condensation, and this is likely attributed to weather conditions. There's also been a very proactive approach of engaging with tenants, conducting surveys and implementing preventive measures, which have appeared to be giving us those positive results on the way that we are interacting with our tenants and driving into the management of DCM. The reduction in reported DCM cases due to warm weather is a positive trend, and a comprehensive approach involving customer engagement, surveys, preventive measures and collaboration demonstrates the organisation's commitment to effectively managing and resolving DCM issues, with continued efforts in line with the outlined strategies are likely to yield further improvements in this area. The number of damp, condensation and mould received since the date of the last report, which was the 5th of June 2023. In total, we've had 99. Number of surveys completed were 84, and the number of no access to properties was 21. And within the report provided, there's a breakdown of DCM reported cases month by month. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Questions? Councillor Martinelli, yeah?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to say, obviously the numbers are lower in the summer months, but it's still sitting at about 60% cases in the summer as compared to those in winter. Is that a ratio you would typically expect, or what's the general view on how much cases should drop in the warmer summer months?
I'll ask Victoria to answer that question.
That's fine. I mean, we don't have an awful lot of data. We can't look back on the previous years because we've not been collating that data. So what we have is just the past sort of year. But what I can tell you that out of all the reports that we've received, sorry, I'll just put my camera on. Have actually had damp and mould issues where it's actually building related. So out of all those, it's mainly due to sort of ventilation and, maybe a bit overcrowding and things like that. So although, we get a lot of reports, it's not true damp and mould, it's not rising damp, it's not a building issue. So, I mean, we're addressing those. I mean, that doesn't answer your question, but I hope it goes some way to putting a bit of, you know, context to the reports. They look high, but actually our buildings are performing well. And we're doing all we can to sort of reduce this, and it probably will increase in the later months. We do have working groups starting again with environmental health and other sort of health professionals that are going in to visit properties where they can report damp and mould to us, and we work together to see how we can improve. You know, if somebody sees damp and mould in those properties, they can get onto us and we can work together to see how we can resolve these issues. So I hope that goes part way to answering your question.
Got Diane Best has got her hand up. Diane, and then Naomi, yeah?
Thank you very much for the report. It's extremely helpful, but I'd like to ask about leaseholders that are in blocks of flats where you have received or surveyed damp, condensation and mould problems. Are you getting contact from leaseholders? And if so, what advice do you give them? And in blocks of flats where you've had lots of communication with tenants, but there are leaseholders in the block, do you encourage the leaseholders to come forward? I mean, I know in the policy that we approved at a previous meeting, there was a clause added about leaseholders, but I would be very grateful if you could elaborate a bit about how this situation does affect leaseholders and what can be done about it.
Yes, okay, yes, that's something actually we do need to sort of think about, and perhaps that will come out in our working group where we engage with our leaseholders as well. But yeah, leaseholders have contacted us and we would talk to them about it exactly the same way we would with the tenants. So we'd give them the leaflet that we send out, and that's about condensation and heating and all the rest of it. And we'd also carry out a survey for the building. So if it's a flat, we would go and look at the building, because that's the structure, isn't it, that we're responsible for. But yeah, we would just more or less treat tenants the same way as we would leaseholders the same way we would with a tenant. But I do think that we do need to engage with them a bit better, and that's how we will engage with the leaseholder team to say how can we do that, what's the best approach, so that they know who to contact if they've got any issues.
Can I ask a subsidiary question, Chair? When these problems have been identified in a leasehold property, any remedial work within the property presumably will fall to the responsibility of the leaseholder. And what advice can you give them about possibly the choice of using a contractor or instructions for doing a mould wash, things like that? And I think it would be very helpful if the leaflet and advice about doing mould wash and so on was incorporated on the council's website.
Yes, I totally agree, and that's something that I think we talked about at another meeting that we had, that yeah, we want to do that, and put some information about how to carry out a mold wash if you need to, and check your extractor fans are working. And in terms of tenants, leaseholders, they would have under their lease, they'll have their responsibility, that if they're responsible for maintaining and replacing their extractor fans, that they're in good working order. So that would come down to their lease. We wouldn't carry out works for them, and I'd need to check on if we can give them advice on contractors to use. I think that might be something that, I'd have to look at that to see if we could do that. But yes, agree totally. Yeah, just to get that information out to leaseholders as well on our web page, and maybe a link to how to carry out a mould wash on our communications. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Bennett, yeah?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on our own experience in Abbey. As you may know, from about mid-October last year, we were getting at least one referral a day, and it didn't let up until January, and quite late in January. Since then, we're only really getting two sorts of queries about condensation, damp and mould. The first goes, "Dear Councillor, I contacted the condensation, damp and mould hotline, and a lovely man came out and washed away my mould, but I haven't heard anything since." That's query one. And the other issues we're having is typically it's older tenants who don't do social media. And what's happening then is that we've been asked to visit them at home for another reason. And we have noticed condensation, damp and mould, and they haven't raised it. So my first question is, what's happening about the people you've already seen, and communicating any longer term and medium term follow-up work they're going to do? And the second question is, what are we doing to reach the digitally excluded older tenants? And I do have some suggestions about that, which I'd love to discuss after the meeting. Thank you.
You want to respond to that now, and then I'll get Councillor Wade in, yes?
I can respond to that, Chair. So in terms of follow-up, we have built in a process where we engage with the tenant 8 weeks after the initial survey to establish whether they are satisfied with the works, or indeed the works have worked, and then we can build in remedial actions to remedy that. In terms of reaching out to older tenants, we are not only investing time and energy into updating the data that is on our social media websites, we are designing leaflets that we can drop into those residents. And we are also in a position where our surveyors or tenant liaison officers will be able to educate, inform and advise accordingly.
Can I ask if we ensure that any, well, you said you've gone in for something else, you do damp condensate, mould, that happens. We all have to be alert, so perhaps it's a kind of a duty on other officers who might go in for something else, and I presume that's part of it. If someone goes in for repair and there's unreported damp condensation and mould, we hope that that then gets reported, or they check with the tenant and report it on their behalf, because you're right, people aren't actually able to go and get online and do it, or they may not even be aware that anything. You know, as well, people put up with a lot. You make do and mend, don't you? You wipe that damp down from time to time, and it comes back. You just think people will think it's just part and parcel of living there, not realising it could be improved. So that's an education process in itself, isn't it?
So, Chair, may I add as well that we're working hard with our housing officers and our operators when they're going out on their daily visits. There's a potential damp mould or condensation related issue, they will report that back into the respective teams. Housing officer tenancy audits also look at DCM related issues.
Just think that anyone goes in has to be as alert as it's not just noticing that, but other things as well, because you're through the front door and you're not invading anybody's privacy by pointing out things that they need to get sorted, are you? So I think that's really important. Right, Councillor Wade.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask what the DCM programme is for the winter months, as we're rapidly approaching that. Thank you.
Roy, can I hand that to you, please?
That for me?
Yes, please, Victoria.
Yeah. So literally carry on as we are, because I think that we're doing a really good job. You know, we are getting our reports. We've got our tenant liaison officer there. We've got our surveyor there. We've got the other teams engaging with us. We do have a piece of work to do where we update our website with some current information. We're putting together a winter letter for our tenants that will get sent out, hard copies, email, social media, that kind of thing, so that we can be a bit more proactive and let people know where we are and what we can do to help them. So it's kind of business as usual with a little bit more engagement with our tenants as the winter months approach. So that's our plan. We're constantly reviewing what we do. We have developed a new risk assessment survey that our surveyor uses, and we review that sort of every couple of weeks. How's that going? We have a questionnaire that we've developed so that we can sort of triage the calls. Our tenant liaison officer calls the tenant and just sort of triages so that we can highlight the severe cases and prioritize those, and we continue to work through our risk assessment damp and mould action plan that we put together for the Housing Ombudsman. So it's kind of an ongoing process. It's work in progress, and it will carry on developing and improving as we go on.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments? Well, thank you all for that report. It's good progress, I think. And we just keep going. Once again, thanks for keeping us safe, because it's our homes, and we're very grateful for the work that's done. And technically, because it's been called in, I just need to, the recommendation is we're going to vote on noting the progress of the compliance-related work detailed within the report. So those in favour of that?
Unanimous, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. I thought it would be unanimous. Yes, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. You can go home now. You are at home. Those who are at home can go home now, yes? We just have to stay for a bit longer, yeah? And, of course, the Executive Council, I'm no doubt, will be accepting the recommendation. Thank you.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Thank you, Ren.
Thanks again. The next agenda item 8, is a housing ombudsman determination, which we would take. I think it's been called in. I'm sure it has. But we want to hear for that. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So is it going to be Tom Lewis? Sorry. It's Sean again. Sorry, I've got it on my list. Yes, it is. It is you again. Sorry. Sean.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So the last time the report came to committee detailing a fault by the Ombudsman with respect to a housing-related service was in 24th of January 2020. Since then, there has been one case where fault has been found. Some background behind this: the case was assessed by the local ombudsman, social care ombudsman. A complaint by Mrs. X that the council had incorrectly advertised one of their properties, where it failed to advise her about withdrawal rights in the process, and as a result, she accepted the property and said she experienced stress and cost as a result. The ombudsman concluded there was a fault and there was which caused an injustice, and accepted the ombudsman's findings and approached X with a offer of either making a 50% financial for drop curb.
Sean, you're breaking up a bit. Can you just?
Oh, sorry.
It may just
Can
be
you hear
the way
me?
of. That's better. I think that's better. Is it?
Yeah. Yeah. Where did you get up to? Was it where? So the ombudsman had compiled some suggestions to address the complaint that was made by Mrs. X. The first one was to make a 50% financial contribution to the installation of a dropped curb, which was indeed the reason of the complaint, of a value of £1,000, and to prioritise a tenant alteration request, or B, to offer a direct let of a like-for-like property. Mrs. X accepted the option of the £1,000 contribution for the dropped curb. As a result of this case, and in addition to the remedies provided, we've made some recommendations and changed procedures in the way that we offer and advertise our properties. Not only has the council expanded the letting team and has a new management in place, that team is in the process of reviewing their current policies, particularly in terms of the end-to-end processes and procedures to look for areas of improvement. Moving forward, the letting teams and the voids teams are now working collectively together to improve information exchange, and that can range from written documentation, photographs of the property in question, so there's clear and actual detail that can be referred and related back to any prospective tenant. And again, the prospective tenant can view the property in advance of any forward offer. This would ultimately improve the customer experience and reduce officer time taken to carry out the viewings. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Sean. Are there any questions? I just think the clearer that we make an offer, the better. People might feel, oh, I've got to take it, but we've got to. It is a choice-based letting system. We have to remember that, yes? And I think that sometimes people aren't quite aware of that fact, yes? Thank you. Are there any other comments or observations? Okay, thank you very much, Sean. And there is a recommendation to note the information contained within the report and approve all the remedial actions that have been outlined and the measures established to reduce or eliminate the risk of repeat mistakes in future cases. Well, we like to know we've learned from experience, so that's great. All those in favour of that?
Unanimous.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sean, again for the report. And Councillor Bird, do you approve the recommendations, yeah?
I do, Chair. Thank you.
Very much. Well, that's my duties for tonight, but I will sit here for the rest of the meeting. I'll hand it back to Dinah, who's doing the next bit, part 2.
Thank you very much, Diana. Right, moving on to agenda item 9, and we have a report on the update of new build council housing delivery. And over to you, Ben, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to highlight some of the key points in this report. It's a regular report that shows the updates. Pleased to report that we're now up to 847 new build homes, of which 457 are new council homes. And we've just completed the handover of Campkin Road, 75 council homes, Clark Maxwell, which is 14 council homes, and Histon Road, 9 council homes, and they are, the last 2 are Section 106 sites purchases. So that's good news. We've also submitted 2 further bids to Homes England, adjusting one bid for Aylesbury Close as Homes England changed the parameters of funding, so we can now fund replacement homes. So that's been changed for Aylesbury Close, and the same for Colville Road Phase 3, and we have a very good record of getting acceptance for that. No news yet, but as soon as we know, we'll report back to committee. Another bit of good news is that we the council, have obtained some further funding for refugee housing, and that was approved quite quickly through our urgent decision process, of which there's a copy in the reporting. I think it's agenda item 13. That's in addition to the funding of 4.9 million earmarked for Afghan and Ukrainian refugees. We have unfortunately decided to stop Ted Away scheme, which is one accessible wheelchair home. Unfortunately, it didn't achieve value for money, and so we made the decision that that has to be stopped. Now, that we'll bring forward alternative proposals in due course. There is a bit of detail on 4.2 as to why. We just wanted to confirm that there are 3 other accessible homes being developed, so it's only one of 4, and at the same time we would look to replace this one at Ted Away with an alternative development in due course, and we'll report that back, what that replacement will be. Other things just to highlight to the committee, we made some improvements to the table which I hope makes it a bit more user-friendly to read. And the other aspect is just some updates on some of the other projects, of which there is an error that I do need to highlight. So I'm referring to Section 11, the new programme. It does say the East Barnwell Local Centre, we're bringing a report to this committee. That has been postponed to November, so that's a clarification there. But two points to note, further points to note, ATS Merkets, that is on track at the moment for a planning submission by KIP later in the year, and the City Council is currently looking to purchase the affordable homes, which will come back to committee in January if it is submitted in November. There is a brief update on Hanover and Princess, which we're working through, and Newbury Farm, another KIP scheme that's been purchased by KIP with approval from the S&R committee. We will also, as the council, be looking to purchase the affordable homes on that site, and we'll come back at a future HSC scheme as well. So those are the key points of the report. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Griffin.
Is it on? Yep. Thank you, Ben. This is a really informative report, and I thank you very much. It really displays the amazing amount of work that's been going on constructing new houses. In Cambridge, we were on a KIP tour last week, and it was really impressive to see a lot of these new developments. Also, I've seen the Campkin Road development, which is really gorgeous. It's a beautiful development. And I hope more residents of Cambridge could go by and take a look at that, because it's quite impressive. I just had one clarification on the St. Thomas, the data you have here on St. Thomas Road development. It says 8 houses, and I just wanted to clarify, because most residents think there's going to be a development of 7 houses there. And I assume that extra house is that one we purchased on St. Thomas Road, number 8, in order to widen the road there. Is that the case? I think your mic isn't on.
Beg your pardon, I'll restart. I will double check that if it does include the house on the corner, or indeed our process is to have the updated figure once a planning submission is made. So I will report back and clarify if the figure should be 7, which is the current proposals for planning submission, or whether that figure includes the house on the corner as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd just like to add to that that I attended the handing over party that KIP held for the residents on Timberworks, which is in Romsey, which is my ward. And I have to say that there's now a fabulous community there. People are really pleased, really happy, and a really nice atmosphere there. So again, I think thank you for that. It's a really good development. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Martinelli, Councillor Bennett, and Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the risk register in section 10, and I note the likelihood of problems related to decanting residents and leaseholders marked as a 3 strong possibility. Are you satisfied with that, or do you think it's more likely to be a higher risk, given everything we've heard this evening?
Hello, Councillor Martinelli, we can't hear you very well.
Sure. So I'm just looking at the risk register in section 10, and particularly the one relating to the decanting of residents and leaseholders as part of the programme, which is marked as a likelihood 3 strong possibility. I'm just questioning whether we're satisfied with that as the risk rating for the likelihood of that, given everything we've heard this evening. Should we be looking at a risk of 4, which would be probable, or are we sticking with 3 as a strong possibility?
Okay, Chancellor Chair. Yeah, so I take your point. At the moment, for Eakin Road, that is not a scheme, so we don't report it as such. For current schemes, the risk of decanting is relatively low because the majority have already been rehoused. So that's why that risk is appropriate for now. should Eakin Road be a scheme going forward, or indeed any other scheme of which there may be high levels of resident concern, then would need to adjust the risk appropriately.
Do we have Councillor Bennett, beg your pardon.
When we're all arranged round like this. Okay. First of all, thank you to Ben for the care in doing this report and his team. Also apologising for speaking with my back to him, but I can't stand easily and hold the mic, and if I don't hold the mic, you can't hear me. So I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about 11, the new programme, which is page 129 of your reports. And I'd like to start off with the Diva Park, and this is a question that Councillor Sam Davies has asked me to ask. Her ward is Queen Edith, in which a Diva Park sits, and I'm not quite sure where the separate report is.
We have another item, which we'll discuss Diva Park. It's item, I think, 11 or 12. So if you'd like to save that one for the next that item, I think that would be be clearer, yeah.
And the second thing I wanted to talk about is the East Barnwell Local Centre. Those of you who've been councillors a lot longer than me will know that this is sort of a 21-year saga. And residents tend to get very twitchy and anxious at anything, any delay. So I can see there's not a written report, but I just wondered if Ben would like to give us an oral update on progress. It would be very reassuring to the residents who are concerned about the local centre, and also, as we've seen, to Eakin Road residents.
Yeah, I think we do have information on that.
Yeah, happy to update. We have written to residents and commercial tenants and put a note on the website as to there indeed has been a delay. One of the reasons for the delay is to ensure we've got the right balance in terms of provision, in terms of the overall impact it has on the finances. As you know, councils are having to make sure that every penny counts, and so it was right and proper just to do a further due diligence on the finances. But I can reassure you, we are targeting a planning submission in November, subject to committee approval in November.
Could I just ask a supplementary question? The one question residents have asked for me is, do we have an updated estimate at when the nursery might be expected to be finished? Because that's one thing that residents are most concerned about.
I can understand the desire for a date. I don't think I can commit to that at the moment. I would hope in the report we could give a bit more detail in relation to that, but I don't think I can commit to that now, but I'm happy to talk outside the meeting if you have further questions related to that, but it's not something I can go on public record, apart from saying the planning submission is we are committing to November.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Wade.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to commend Councillor Bird and Ben and the Housing Development Agency for the continued progress in delivering such excellent housing in the context of the thing that we're not supposed to mention, which is Brexit. Because, as we know, the cost of materials has gone through the roof. We have staff skills shortages, supply chain issues. 60% of imported materials come from the EU. Before Brexit, 40% of all construction workers came from the EU. I could go on all evening, but I won't. But I just wanted to give some context to the work that we're doing, the standard that is being achieved with the added complications, not to mention the increased cost of materials. So thank you.
Thank you, and yes, I think we all agree with that one. Yeah, thank you very much. If we're happy to go to the recommendation now, which is on page 114, and the Executive Council has recommended to note the continued progress on the delivery of the approved housing programme. And have all those in favour, please.
Seven.
Those against? And those abstaining?
2 abstentions, sorry, none against.
So that recommendation is passed. Can I ask the Executive Councillor, Councillor Bird, if you're happy with our recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am, and I think it's an excellent report, and so pleased of all the housing that's being built, and may it continue. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to agenda item 10, and we have a report by Benedict Binns. Thank you very much. This is on the report on new council housing, and it's specifically Fanshawe Road.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if anything needs to be said about the exempt information. Would you like me to go through what's in the public domain? Yep.
Oh, I need to just say to you, please, that members, could you please note that the information contained with appendices 1 and 2 is considered to be exempt from disclosure. Should members wish to discuss this information, a vote will need to be taken to discuss the information in exempt session. If approved, any members of the public will be asked to leave the chamber and the live stream will need to be paused. So is there anybody who wishes to discuss the information? No. So thank you very much for that, yes.
Okay, so this, I'll talk through the exec summary and what the recommendation we are looking for. So Fanshawe is a development scheme of Fanshawe Road. There is HSC approval for a scheme of which there were 2 options, one 100% affordable scheme and one which was an alternative of a mixed tenure scheme. What we're doing to provide complete transparency is to come back for approval for the mixed tenure scheme, and the exec summary outlays and explains the reasons for that. So option B of the original paper was 47% market and 53% affordable, which is what we are proposing. There's a couple of statements made that are in our Sustainable Housing Design Guide about inclusive and a range of tenures being provided, making better places and better communities. The other thing that the council has to do is look at, from a programme point of view, of which schemes look best suited for Homes England applications and which schemes are best not to do that. So in other words, we need to make some choices and judgment calls from a programme point of view. And at the same time, we also need to look at the finances of the HRA and what risk mitigations we can undertake to ensure that the council is protected from rising price rises and so on. So some schemes throughout this process have gone from mixed tenure to 100% affordable, such as the passive house pilot schemes were mixed tenure initially and we switched them to affordable. This scheme we're recommending should be switched to mixed tenure, and by doing that, what we are able to do, if it's delivered by KIP, is the sales value can offset any build cost inflation, and so the council has a fixed price for the affordable. The second advantage of this is that the budget goes down from 28.5 million to approximately 13 million. So there's a saving there for the HOA that can be spent on other homes in the programme. So the scheme is still as it was in HSC in terms of sustainable targets. So we're aiming for passive house principles. There is a doubling of the affordable number from currently 20 council tenants to 45. So that would be 53% affordable, which means it's above the planning of target of 40%. There is a breakdown of how this works under KIP. So there will be a land value, a land receipt back to the HRA. As a result of this, the HRA benefits from that. There will be a surplus generated via KIP, which we will use to offset the purchase of the affordable housing. We are taking legal advice on that to make sure that is a robust way of obtaining that approach. In the exempt papers, there are two bits of information. One is the KIP appraisal and one is a land valuation. The KIP appraisal comes out with a certain set of figures. We check those figures, and particularly the land valuation, with the land value. And if that is appropriate, we can then proceed. And on this basis, the land valuation does indeed indicate the KIP appraisal is robust. If this is approved, then we would be looking at a further Red Book valuation for any land sale to KIP in terms of the approach that we're taking on this, and then the council would purchase back the affordable housing. So the recommendation is to approve the mixed tenure scheme brought forward in the proposals in the report, to authorise the Assistant Director for Assets and Property in consultation with the Exec Councillor to approve any variations in this scheme, to authorise the Director for Assets and Property and the Exec Councillor to approve the transfer of land, and to look to KIP to develop the scheme and to ensure there's an independent financial valuation on the land transfer. And finally, to authorise the Assistant Director of Assets and Property in consultation with the Exec Councillor to approve the affordable housing agreement, which will be used to purchase the 45 affordable homes. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ben, for a very clear report. We'll move on to members' questions now, and I am aware that Councillor Martinelli may wish to move an amendment, a copy of which should be available on your seats. So do we have any questions? Councillor Holloway, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Martinelli, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Ben. I agree that mixed tenure is really good where we've made that, where we have had new sites, and I think that is a really positive thing that the council does. And equally, we do want to obviously maximise the number of council homes that we're building. So I just wondered if you could talk a bit more about the rationale behind the Homes England grant decision and why you think, given we've got a really good track record, we're less likely to get a Homes England grant for this particular development, and is there a sort of maximum limit on numbers of schemes we can apply for example, or something like that?
We are successful in Homes England applications, partly because we deliver so well, but at some point we may be rejected. So what we would like to do is to maximise the grant with the maximum opportunity. And as you've seen, there are schemes coming forward, such as East Barnwell and others, where the Homes England grant would benefit the programme overall. And so there are decisions to be made about how we maximise that opportunity. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is, how do you mitigate against risk overall? Mixed tenure schemes do that better overall. So it's about finding balance across the programme in order to do that. So I hope that answers your question.
Do you have a supplementary? Yeah, great. Councillor Robertson.
Homes England, of course, have their own criteria and government policy to restrict grants going out. If we had a proper government, we'd have a proper funding scheme. We'd be able to do far more. And I think that's the important bit about this. I mean, one of the options which came to us when this first came was for 100% affordable homes, narrow down to 53%. And although we're getting 45 affordable homes, it's not the same as we would have got. So you've got to recognise that we're being starved of the resources we need to build houses.
Thank you. I think we move on to Councillor Martinelli.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think in common with others, it's obviously we're keen to see affordable homes being built. I think this does strike me as a significant change in direction compared to what we've seen over the last few years. I think there would have been a time where the idea of this being a mixed tenure scheme would not have been something executive councils would really have been in favour of supporting. And I guess my question to the exec is this the kind of scheme we expect to see more of going forward, more mixed tenure and less focus on affordable homes purely?
Are you happy to answer that? Or would you like to answer, Councillor Bird?
Councillor Martinelli, no, there's something I don't like to see, but sometimes we can't help it, the way things are. My dream is that every house built is for our tenants and get people and our residents to get them off the housing list. It can't always work that way, as you know. So this is one decision we've had to make, and we'll see how it goes from there. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. And Councillor Bennett.
Hi, I just had a few very small points, mostly on behalf of Councillor Elliott-Tong. The first one is that when we give a percentage for affordable housing, it's based on front doors. And because a lot more of our affordable housing tends to be 1 or 2 bedroom properties, we'd like to ask if we could have some information that gives us a better viewpoint. And I think Officer Ben has suggested that we could maybe have some information showing a percentage based on the number of bedrooms. And I think this would be quite helpful, particularly if we're looking to have more 3-bedroom properties in future, because we'll be able to compare like to like. And the second point I wanted to make is we are, as the pink pages say, I'm not going to refer to them in detail, we don't need to close the session, we are entering a period of great instability, both in terms of government grants, because the pressure to do pre-election goodies is going to increase as we go forward to a general election date. And also the housing market is becoming less and less stable. So I just wanted to ask what arrangements we have for reviewing programme, which does tie in with Councillor Martinelli's points about arrangements for reviewing any revision of this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben, would you like to answer that? Or would you like to?
Yes, so I think there's a question on 3-bed homes and just generally in terms of provision. That is in the update report, a breakdown. Happy to answer any specific question, again, if that's required related to that. On Fanshawe itself, there are proposals for 9 3-bedroom flats, which is part of the proposal, and all of those will be council homes, and they're also for wheelchair accessible flats as well. So we've taken the point about 3-bed homes seriously in relation to that. In terms of reviewing plans before they go to planning submission, we do, as a matter of course, ensure that all ward councillors see the planning documents or the layouts or what we're proposing to submit for planning before it is submitted for planning. And at the same time, what we try and do is before consultation as well. So there is a process of making sure ward councillors are aware of what our proposals are. And this is part of the process about coming back and being open and transparent and saying this is how we'd like to proceed on this basis.
I have a quick supplementary. I know it's difficult when I've got my back to you, and I apologise for that. But I actually think I asked a slightly different question, which was that we report on our percentages of affordable housing on the basis of front doors. And we asked whether we could have alternative supplementary reporting based on number of bedrooms.
Yes,
Because otherwise I think it gives, because it tends to be more 1 and 2 bedrooms, it gives a rather misleading viewpoint.
Yeah, my apologies. That is fairly standard reporting that lots of councils or housing associations do. Number of bedrooms per units. We can add that to the report if required, if that helps.
Thank you very much. I think, Diana, you would like to make a point.
The only thing I just want to express, I've written on my report, and I'm only talking, I don't want to vote, is disappointed. And the disappointed was that we don't have 100% affordable on this site. That's number one. But the second bit of disappointment is that in the affordable rents, 11 of those are at that higher 80% of market rent, and 34 at the local housing allowance one, which is the model for places like ironworks, etc. And that's where I'm disappointed, because we've gone from having a site that's totally owned by the council with social rented homes on to a different balance. So when we say affordable, I'd say affordable and not quite so affordable. I'm sorry, I just have to make that point, because I think it's quite important in a cost of living crisis, and I know we're trying to get mixed tenure. It seems to me we should be trying to provide homes where we can with the best rents for people to actually survive in. That's an observation I felt I needed to say as a tenant, yeah?
Thank you. If that's all members' questions, Councillor Martinelli, do you wish to move your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hopefully it's self-explanatory, but essentially all I'm proposing doing, and I'm thankful to Councillor Bennett for seconding, is that should further alterations be made to the scheme, I think opposition spokespeople and the Chair of Housing should also be consulted, given the significant potential budgetary implications of those changes in particular. So it's essentially just a request for more consultation, the likes of which I think have previously been approved for other schemes, and we'd be grateful for that transparency going forward.
Thank you. So I'll take a vote on the amendment then. All those in favour of the amendment?
That's 3, Chair.
And those against?
That's 6, Chair.
So the amendment is not carried. So, pardon? Oh. So now can I move to the actual recommendation? They're quite long. Have you all been able to read them so that I don't need to read the whole thing out? Yeah. If we're happy, can I have all those in favour of the recommendations as they stand?
That's 6 in favour, Chair.
Those against? And those abstaining?
So 3 abstentions, none against.
So the recommendations are carried by the committee. Can I ask the Executive Councillor, please, if she approves our recommendations?
Yes, I do, Chair. And I just wanted to explain one thing. If we build 1 to 2 bedroom flats, that way people can move in who've got a house, a 3-bedroom house, don't need it, and then move into the flats, and then a family can have that house. Straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, I'd like to call a short adjournment now, so if you would mind stopping the live stream.
The park, otherwise known as item 11, isn't it? Who's going to propose? Ben, would you like to present this report, please?
Yes, so I'm now on agenda item 11. Yep. So this relates to a Section 106 purchase on what is called Adiva Park. Adiva Park is to the south of Cambridge and is being developed by this land. It sits next to a site that is currently being developed by KIP, which is Newbury Farm. This particular purchase relates to 32 affordable units that we are purchasing from this land. And we've got the breakdown of the number of homes and the tenure that relate to that. So 1 4-bed, 5 3-beds, 2 3-beds, 7 2-beds, and 17 1-beds. We've got the details of the cost there of approximately just over 8 million. It's a relatively straightforward purchase. There have been some questions in relation to community and commercial provision. That is on site, but it's not related to the Adiva Park purchase. So it's not in this report, but I'm happy to take questions around that. We will be appointing a clerk of works and employer's agent to monitor the purchase, and the purchase will only take place with approval from this committee, but we are ready to run with that purchase so long as we get the approval. Are there any questions?
Yes, any questions anybody's got? Councillor Bennett.
This is a question I'm asking on behalf of Councillor Sam Davis, who is a ward councillor for Queen Edith. And although Queen Edith is quite a wealthy ward, it is very poor in community facilities. And for that reason, I would like to take Ben Binns up on his offer to outline the expected community provision associated with this and with the larger Newbury Farm projects. Thank you.
Yes, this is part of a very large site, actually, so it'd be quite interesting to see what is on the whole site.
Yes, so the community provision isn't related to this report, so this is a fraction of the Adiva Park. What I can tell you for the Newbury Farm purchase by KIP is that on that site there is community provision in the Section 106, either on-site or off-site. So therefore, officers and members may need to liaise on the appropriate response to that in terms of on-site or off-site, but there is Section 106 funding that's earmarked for community provision. There is also commercial provision, probably for a shop, perhaps a small cafe, also that's part of the Newbury Farm development. So that, I can tell you, sort of outside this report, is definitely in place.
So what is the position on planning at the moment? Have they got the requirement to provide all these facilities either on or off site?
So in terms of planning for the commercial and community, the planning for Newbury Farm is targeting November. That does include the commercial provision. The Section 106 provision for the community provision is somewhat complicated. It rests on this land being able to come up with a plan. If that plan doesn't materialise, then it rests with KIP to liaise with members and officers on community provision on-site or off-site.
Okay, Councillor Cameron.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed in the report that there was the council wanting all 32 to be let at 60% or LHA rate, but that hasn't actually been agreed yet. So I wondered if you could talk about that negotiation process. How likely are we to actually get all of those houses at 60% or LHA rate, if it's possible to say at this point, and what would alternatives be if that didn't happen?
Yes, so we are currently in legal discussions for the purchase. Once we've got approval, then we would expect to finalise that purchase, but that's very much dependent on this land providing the appropriate information at the right time and to our satisfaction. There are risks, so it may not go ahead if, for example, we are concerned about their progress. There are also concerns, or at least we would need the issues around the road access mitigated against, in terms of, at the moment, there is a contractor doing the infrastructure on site. So we will have checks and balances if we do sign the approval, if we do sign the legal agreement, that will ensure that certain things are provided before we take over the entire purchasing of the home. So if the road isn't provided, we're under no obligation to continue to purchase the home. So there are lots of checks and balances in the agreement. Does that answer your question?
There's the planning issue in section.
Yeah, there's also, that's right. There's also a Section 106 agreement on shared ownership, which we are looking to change. So there will be a deed of variation to the Section 106 to ensure that switch to affordable rent rather than shared ownership, which is the preference of the council.
Sorry, Councillor Lee.
Yeah, it's not really so much a question, I suppose, but more really some concerns that I have, given that this is also, it's in my ward as well. It's a lot of houses that are being built, which I am supportive of, in fact, but if you're saying that there's going to be a community space there, which may or may not be on site, and maybe one shop, it doesn't sound quite adequate, given the number of houses that are being built there. And I do have a concern that with all these houses that are being built, there is no kind of joined up plan between Newbury Farm, between the GB1 site, between Endeavour Park, and any future developments, including GB2, potentially. And so we'll be left with a lot of houses, inadequate supply of commercial space, and inadequate supply of community space. So, and not only that, but also I do also worry that this will be also a very car-centric design as well, when we are trying to not have cars so much. And I wonder about public transport integration and the integration of all the sites in a connected way into the active travel network that exists within Cambridge. So I mean, I'd just like you to take into consideration all these things when you are developing the site.
Yes, so there's quite a few questions there, specifically on the DEVA purchase. The design in terms of car park spaces is something we can influence a little bit, and we are looking at that. There's currently one-to-one parking, which is not typically what we aim for when we purchase our own, when we build our own council homes. We certainly have a much lower parking ratio. So that is something we will look at in terms of cycle storage, cycling network, and public transport. It is pretty well served for that particular site, and that's something we took into consideration in terms of the purchase. In terms of the amount of community provision and the amount of commercial provision, that would have been dictated by the planning service in relation to that. Whether it's enough or not, I think it's difficult to say at this stage, but I take your point. What I would say is that there is some influence on the Newbury Farm site because it's being developed by KIP. So if there are questions or you want to see more interface on that, that's something we can arrange and take on board some of your comments.
Thank you. It's somewhat outside the scope of this committee to dictate what the planners allow on the site. But I hope we will all push for the community facilities and all these other buildings on the whole site. Any more questions? Sorry.
It's just a quick one when we're looking at this. I don't know how many homes are going to go on the Newbury Farm site. Do we have any idea? Didn't mention it because they're adjoined. It's always, we never talk about what about provision in local schools? Is this all part and parcel, and is that catered for in the overall, community and other provision? Because you've got quite a large site. I don't know what the local school capacity is, but it's sometimes that it's obviously something that has to be done in conjunction, I would imagine, with the county council. I just wonder what, as an observation, what we do when we've got a big site like that, or a joint site.
So, I mean, I'll have to go away and get some answers to that, but on Newbury Farm, there's 150 homes, of which 40% will be affordable. So that's part of that purchase. And on Adiva, again, that's 40%. So I think it's around, it's got 48 private and 32 affordables. So it is a sizable development in total. There will be provision in the Section 106 agreement for education and health. None of the two developments we're talking about relate to any building of any schools, but I can go away and find out where the local schools are.
I don't know what the local school have the capacity for what might be projected extra children, and would Section 106 be able to make a contribution to the expansion of that school if it was found that that school needed that? I just think it's one of those things that we're doing the housing, but we have to think of the rest of the implication. You're building homes that will inevitably have kids in them, whatever age it may be. So has the local infrastructure got the capacity to educate those children as well? And I suppose would that be a planning consideration as well, yeah?
That's a consideration for the county council within the planning
decisions.
So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Wade.
Yes, just to add an observation really that the site is near the Baburn Park and Ride service. That is also served by, once you get to Addenbrooks, the number 1 bus and the number 2 bus. So until we get our new integrated system, it's well served, I think. And also there are shops at Wolfston Way currently, I understand.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. You mentioned then that there are certain checks and balances in place. I know that this land doesn't necessarily have a very good reputation. So in terms of the building control, would that be carried out by a third party that they would choose? And if so, what steps would we take to then check that as well, given, for example, the problems that happened at Darwin Green? That wasn't this land, but you see what I mean?
Yes, that's a fair question. In terms of building control, or what provision and provider they wish to use, that's out of our remit in terms of this purchase. What we can do is employ a consultant to be an employer's agent to check that the design is to the council's preference, and also a clerk of works which will be on site to check the various different building components are done to the satisfaction to the council. So there are checks and balances in there to make sure. And of course, there are stage payments where we can say, well, this has been done, we're happy to move on to the next stage.
Right. Any more questions? No? All right, let's take us to the recommendations. I'll drop my page. 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Everybody happy with those recommendations? Please show those in favour.
That's 5 in favour, Chair.
Those against?
None.
Those abstaining? Thank you very much. Exec Councillor, would you like to accept those recommendations?
Yes, Chair. I'd also like to just say that there is schools around there. You've got Coleridge Secondary School, Netherhall School, you've got the Queen Edith's Junior School. So there is a few schools and another junior school in Cherry Hinton, but I can't think what it's called.
Okay, so move on to item 12, which is the rooftop development, retrofitting as an experiment. Is that you? Ben again, please.
I'm afraid it's me again, but I'll keep it brief. This is a very exciting scheme. What I would just point out, it is pilot scheme, but if it does prove to be something of a success, then we would look to come back and look at other schemes. So this pilot scheme is looking at how we can increase the number of stories on a particular block and also retrofit at the same time. And that has two immediate benefits. It's trying to aggregate the asset management budget, which has to be done on these blocks, and at the same time perhaps increase by a story or two. So it follows on a commitment in September 21 to look at rooftop developments. They are reasonably common in other parts of the country, mainly London. And so what we're looking at is 3 blocks in this investigation. So I stress this is a pilot, so we're looking at design, we're looking at what impact this may have on residents, what impact this may have in the wider area. And so there are 3 blocks that have been shortlisted, which are detailed in the report as well. And the budget is also being put forward to the medium-term financial strategy. And so an architect will be appointed later this week. And that architect's role, along with the other consultant, is to look at this block and to understand what is required in order to achieve it, to get to the next stage. So I stress this is pilot, but there'll be a lot of questions asked, a lot of surveys undertaken just to understand what impact that might have. I don't know if there's any further questions on that, but I would certainly stress the point that tenants are living in the block. We are aware of that. We're sensitive to that. Engagement has already begun with those tenants. And we will approach that sensitively in relation to that. We can't say how intrusive the work will be at this stage, but we are assuming there will be some need to move out, and we will work with tenants, some of which are elderly, to minimise that impact as we go forward. What we don't want is tenants in situ beyond the pilot scheme where there will be lots of noise and lots of disruption. So that's all part and parcel of the report that we'll bring back to committee for further review and possibly further approval.
Questions? Yeah, Diana.
I don't have a vote on this. I have a question, and I should perhaps have asked it earlier. This is sheltered blocks you've chosen, yes? So if you decide to go ahead, practically do it, will the resulting flats be sheltered, part of the sheltered scheme? I think that might be quite important. I don't know whether it would have an impact. I do think that's actually quite important, yes. I just wondered if that would be the case, because people are in the sheltered schemes because they wanted to be in a sheltered scheme. They've obviously chosen in many ways to be in a particular age group, yeah? And you might want to mix it, but when you mix it within flats, that's slightly different. That's just a question, yeah?
Yes, so I mean, there's a lot of things that will have to be taken into account. Some of these properties have, despite being a sheltered scheme, have poor accessibility. And so we're looking at it as a whole, and one of the options may be it goes back to a sheltered scheme typically as it was, or do we need to look at it in a much wider context? But the purpose of this is, again, as I say, is a study, it's a pilot, and some of those questions will need to be ironed out.
A quick supplementary. Sheltered schemes is very rare. Technically, you shouldn't really have somebody who's exercised the right to buy because they were exempt, I believe, yeah? So as a scheme, you could do it easily. Will you also be considering, when you do future studies, you could have a mixed tenure block with leasehold and tenancy, which might present different difficulties if you wanted to go upwards, yeah?
For future schemes, we've deliberately chosen a pilot which has the simplest block. It is tenants rather than leasehold. Going forward, if this is a pilot that the council thinks should be rolled out to across our estates, then we'll have to consider what the impact is on leaseholds. And there's all sorts of other questions that will have to come back on that. So I keep stressing it is a pilot, and some of those questions will be answered. Some of those will have to take a bit further work in answering those questions.
All right, we'll have Councillor Wade, then Councillor Bennett, then Councillor Martinelli.
Thank you, Chair. It's just general inquiry, really, about carbon impacts of different schemes. Are they specific to each scheme? Or do you have an overarching report or paperwork on comparing different schemes, like, say, a retrofit versus a rooftop pilot, etc.? Obviously, a retrofit versus a new development, I would think, would be quite well, revealing. But I just wondered if there are any papers, any published data on the City Council for the cost of carbon. Thank you.
So part of the pilot will include carbon assessment in terms of how far we can go towards net zero. Remember, this is a pilot, so it will be sort of design-led, and we'll need to assess what that cost is. Part of that review will also consider what the maximum impact is for the council in terms of energy saving and in terms of the tenant. There are schemes out there that use one of the most advanced or deep retrofits is Enefit. Now, whether that is possible on a scheme such as this or not, we'll have to look at. But net zero, Enefit, and below Enefit. Enefit is retrofit passive house standard. So that would be in line with our new build developments. But that's only one part. That certainly be looked at. Accessibility is another part. How do we ensure that people being able to get up to the upper floor, whether there's lifts provided in this? So it's quite broad, but carbon is very much part of that assessment.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I apologise for having my back to you, Ben. By this stage of the evening, it's much easier for me to sit down. One of the issues I think we've all had is that we've had upwards rooftop extensions in our ward, typically done as permitted development, because you can add up to 2 stories without it going through planning. And it hasn't been a happy experience because invariably it's been done on the cheap, which means tenants have been left in to suffer all the building noise. So I welcome 2 things: the decision to offer a rehoming facility during the works, and also the decision to go with a modular rooftop, which would minimise the upward building. However, I do still have some concerns, and these are as follows. If you're in sheltered accommodation, you can have health issues that make it particularly difficult to move. You may need to have an adapted property, which may need adaptations that have got to be fitted by an occupational therapist, for which at the moment there is a 26-week waiting window. So there's a lot that has to be done in advance. For sheltered tenants who have loss of vision or dementia, it is quite likely that they will want to stay in situ despite the building disruption. And I wonder if you could think about provision for that. And also, I do think that we are going to be seeing more and more of these schemes around Cambridge, and that we need to routinely consider amending permitted development rights on new blocks and having a code of conduct for such works on existing blocks even if we can't enforce it, just sort of setting out the standard might encourage better behaviour and less unpleasantness for tenants. And finally, I just want to mention that in London, there's a lot of building on top of commercial properties, particularly supermarkets. Wandsworth, I believe, has had some very good results. And I do hope that we will be looking at this in future rather than sort of more greenfield sites, because we are running out of brownfield sites in the city and we still have a lot of people who need homes. Thank you.
Okay, to answer, yeah, thank you, Chair. So this goes back to some of the things we've been saying earlier about residents. You are exactly right. In some cases, some of these residents may be vulnerable, certainly will need additional support. We've started that engagement and we will take it very carefully and explain everything to the residents. At the moment, there is no decanting or rehousing going on because it's a pilot. So just to caveat that, we have our own in-house occupational therapist, and so therefore we will ensure that they are engaged where it is required. And so we're not going to do anything until we understand what the residents' needs are in relation to that. So in one sense, we've chosen an easier block because it's all tenants. On the other hand, we're talking about quite tenants with complex needs. So we're fully aware of that, and we'll take that carefully and make sure the residents are treated with dignity. If recommendation comes back that if we are to proceed and there needs to be rehousing, then of course we will need to look at how we do that in terms of sheltered accommodation and all their needs. So that's a given. In terms of, I think, your other question about rooftop above supermarkets, well, again, if this pilot proves to be something that could be rolled out, then there's no reason we can't look at that. Clearly, if we don't own the property, the commercial property, that might have additional complexity, but perhaps we could look at our own properties, that we have commercial properties. Have I missed another question? I think I've answered them.
I think that's all answered, although I would mention that Tesco Newmarket Road, the landlord is the county council.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
They haven't got a very long lease on it, though. Councillor Martinelli.
Thank you. I think my points have actually mostly been covered, so thank you very much for that. I just want to say I think this is a good idea, and I think I would support this this item. I think I would only otherwise re-emphasise the points. I agree completely with Diana that it's really important to keep sheltered housing as part of the mix of what we have. And I think obviously this is a much more complex consultation sort of process than it will be because of the nature of the tenants involved, as you've outlined. And so obviously we'll be looking forward to seeing the results of that process in due course. And in particular, I would also just want to raise the fact that although just by the nature of this, these tenants may well be less able to self-advocate than others, and so we may not necessarily see petitions and things in the same way that we would for others, but that doesn't mean anything. That means it's more important. But that's what I wanted to say.
Do you want to make a question?
Oh, no, the same. No, just try your mic.
Find one that works, because otherwise, that's it.
Here we are. Yeah, just to say we have an independent living service which supports all of our older residents. So we do have actually the capacity to engage in a bit more intensive consultation with older people. So we have that ability to sort of spend a bit more time. We've done recently with things around Ditchburn Place, for example. So yeah, just wanted to make that point that we've got that extra capacity.
Thank you, David.
I just wanted to add a supplementary to that. I did put this on the original list, but I forgot. And would the council consider employing an independent independent mental health advocate?
I think that's a question for another time. I think that's not appropriate today, I think. Right. Any further questions on this item?
My question is, basically, because I go out and do green inspections and that, and I've, on this list that is here, Walpole Road, Brackendale, Fernwood, I have seen some of the places that they've got sheds in the garden which shouldn't be there, they've boarded it off. There's one particular one that I'm not going to mention where it is, but it's completely been cladded inside and it's a fire risk. How are you dealing with this?
Sorry, is that related to this this scheme for? Sorry, can you explain how it's related?
If you're building above and you've still got those tenants in there and they're doing what they're doing, they're going to put everybody else at risk. It is a risk.
Yeah, so to clarify, what the pilot scheme is not just building on top, it's also external insulation or potentially internal insulation. So all those things will have to be considered if there is indeed a fire risk, because the tenants have put cladding up, then we'll have to look at that and understand how severe that risk is. But it's not just putting units or rooms on top, it's the entire building we're looking at.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't understand, but that's a good question. Thank you. Right, any more questions? No. I'll take you to the recommendations on page 210. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, see all those in favour of the recommendations? Unanimous. Great. Executive Councillor, what do you think about that?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, I am happy with that. And just also to say that all the councillors in the 2 wards had a briefing and they were all for this pilot scheme. So,
great.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, we have another, my last item, just to note this item about further refugee scheme funding. That's a note. Otherwise, thank you very much. That's the end of the meeting. Yes. Yes. You can say something.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we've got a gentleman here who's been here many years. Before I became a councillor in 2011, and I really want to thank him for all the work he's done in the housing and everything. David Greening, we're sorry you're going, but hope you enjoy your retirement or whatever you're going to be doing. But thank you, from everybody for all the hard work you've done. Okay.
Absolutely. Well done. Thank you very much. And that is the end of the meeting. You can take us off stream. Thank you very much.